Welcome to the NAO show review. We are going to get real deep into these trades that happened over the week. Just a show of hands. Raise your hand if your NFL team is in the playoffs. Raise your hand if your NAO guys are going crazy in the playoffs.
This is all rude.
Just my last. Raise your hand if you got gifted 2 second-round picks and a first round. No, nobody else. Only that other guy. Oh, all right, okay, all right. So on to the show, Marky Mark. You know what to do.
Yes, sir. So we're going to talk about trades, as Sean said. We've got 3 to talk about, and I have labeled them as the good, the bad, and the ugly.
That's you, Dylan.
And we'll also talk a little fantasy trading 101 and try to give you some education and see if we can learn a little something in the bargain here. So without further ado, we'll go on to the first trade here. So this one is the good. I call this one the good trade. So McJammer received Dallas Goedert, Gus Edwards, and pick number 17 in the 2021 draft. The underdogs received TJ Hawkinson, Salvon Ahmed, pick 24 in the 2021 draft, and a 2022 fourth rounder. Sean, start us off on that. Tell us your thoughts on that trade.
Well, with all of my projections and my numbers, they're coming from our boy Evan. He allowed us to get onto his dynasty trade calculator, something that he pays for, obviously. So all my numbers will be coming from that trade calculator this evening. And for this trade, I have it pretty even, a 1.2 difference, with the underdogs coming in at 22.8 with their side, and McJammer coming in at 21.6. So personally, I think it's a fair trade. I don't see any problems with it. I think the third and the fourth are pretty good value because they get TJ Hawkinson, which is an automatic start at tight end. I mean, they're losing a little bit of depth at running back, but they have the second round pick. So it's a kind of a wash for me. I think both sides, like my calculator said, pretty much got the same thing. Michael, what do you think, bud?
So I'm using a website called Keep Trade Cut, and it's all other dynasty player data points. So every time you get on the website, it'll come up with 3 players. You have to choose one, keep trade cut. And the website uses that to calculate player values. So it's a little reactionary. So say, some player has a huge game and everyone wants to keep him or trade him. That'll reflect in the numbers from week to week. So can change. Numbers are a little bit higher on my end too. So this one actually puts the underdogs getting Hawkinson, Ahmed, and the picks at a little bit of a higher value. This one puts them about 3,000 points above, which, to reference that, is about the difference of Philip Lindsay. So I guess nothing to sneeze at, but still not, a ton of value either. But like Sean said, I don't mind the trade at all. I think it actually works for both sides. This is another one where there's a lot of picks involved, 3 total picks. So the total, like how well this is going to play out in the next few years, one actually goes to 2022. So it's really going to be how do those play out, what kind of value you guys get with those picks, I think is really going to be where this one gets kind of figured out in the long run. But like Sean said, I think the big one is Hawkinson. I know Mark's kind of thrown him around in some trades, I'm sure, before, kind of, with your tight end situation there. So moved him, got some value. I think both sides kind of did pretty well on this one.
Now, correct me if I'm wrong, Marky Mark, but when you drafted Hawkinson to be your starting tight end, and you wanted to move Kittle. Now, when you were trying to move Kittle, were you finding that Kittle was too much of a price tag for most people?
Yeah, his value's high on a lot of these calculators, and It was, I was, maybe my strategy wasn't the best. I was trying to get a good running back and put Kittle and a piece or two in there, but really couldn't get anybody to bite on that. So, yeah, I mean, I drafted Kittle because the running backs I wanted went right before me. The Sanders and Henry were the last two running backs I was willing to draft that high, and they went right before. So I was like, well, I'm going to take Kittle and I'll trade him for a running back, and didn't work out. And then Kittle didn't work out for me this year either. But I thought, yeah, I was like, I'm fine putting Hawkinson in as my starter and trading away Kittle to see if I can get something for him. And I didn't. So now I'll hold on to him and see if I can get that second year value out of him, you know.
I'll try to feel bad for you when you have Kittle in your lineup.
Yeah, I can flex him or I can put him in the tight end spot. Kind of a nice position to be in if he'll stay healthy. That's the thing, you know. That's the big one for him.
They might have a new quarterback next year too.
Yeah, could be.
Good chance.
But for me, interesting thing was that this trade started out as talk for the 101. So yeah, I was going after that number 1 draft pick and the next.
The big Kahuna.
Yeah, and that didn't really happen, but a lot of these names started getting kicked around in big deals, including the 101, and they wanted a little bit too much for what I was willing to pay. So we kind of just said, hey, why don't we'll take out the top value guys here and let's talk about these other dudes, you know. So for me, you know, they got Salvon Ahmed, which with Myles Gaskin gives them the Miami backfield there, depending on what happens with them in the draft or whatever. And then I got Gus Edwards back, who I should have just kept in the first place. Good piece to have for depth, you know. I didn't feel like Goddard was a big drop off from Hawkinson, although he's a little older. So yeah, it was just one of those trades where the pick was important to me at the time to get into the second round because I didn't have my first pick was the third round, so getting into the second round was good for me there. So yeah, I think it was a real fair trade, Mike. You know, you might have noticed these guys are talking about calculators, something we haven't mentioned before in trade talk, but maybe we will a little bit more now that we know the importance of using calculators. So mine had it pretty even too. I actually just called it a fair trade. There was no winner in this trade. It was within the 5%. I used Dynasty 101 calculator. It's a free calculator. It's the default setting is 5% variance. You can set it wherever you want to. It declares a winner, either a fair trade or a winner, and then it gives you the difference in the form of a player, which is I like that too. Kind of tells me how far I'm off, and it includes tiers, and I like that a lot too because the site even says if you're trading for a guy in a higher tier, you may have to pay up a little bit. So yeah, my calculator on this one had it even, so I think that was a good. That's why I call it the good trade. That was the good one. So
well, Mark, I think you made a good point with the fact that I think everybody on this show uses our calculators a little differently. Let's go through and kind of show our cards, as they say, with how we go about using calculators. For me personally, my calculator is Marky Mark, but let's go. I think for me personally, calculator is a good baseline. Like everything is generalized. Everything is depending on how you feel about the person. But I think a calculator is a good starting point to see if you're going to come in at a good starting off point. I know some people like to just throw things out there, trades, and then use that as a starting point. For me personally, that doesn't bother me because we can always talk it out. But I know there are other people in the league that take that very personally. So maybe using a calculator to get that baseline for you would be the best part. What do you think, Marky Mark?
No, baseline is a perfect word for it because, you know, you come in with offer that's kind of insulting, you know, and you're not going to get much play from that manager moving forward. So I like to use the calculators so that I come in with a fair offer, and they don't always get taken, but I think you get a lot more respect if you come in trying to make a fair offer right off the bat. And, you want to be able to have a good relationship with these managers so that you can make deals well into the future. If you come in there with some crap and you haven't put it into a calculator and gotten that good baseline's a great word there, then, you may be turning somebody off for that deal and for future deals. So Mike, what do you think there?
Yeah, I think that's really perfect. I think the one shortcoming, I guess, since we haven't really talked about that too much with the calculator, is it just takes into account the trade in a perfect vacuum. So we were kind of kicking it around earlier just because, before the show with, the investment that Sean put into Mixon,
Yeah.
I can put a trade into for Sean that, is within 49 or whatever points of each other, depending on your calculator. But, if Sean's not getting the value back, then it's not worth it for him. Or if I'm trying to trade Herbert or something like that, it's just a perfect vacuum and it doesn't take into account potentially getting, a top 5-10 quarterback for the next 10 years on your team or anything like that. But yeah, setting the baseline is a perfect way to do it. But then you obviously have to take into account the team dynamics and a little bit more afterwards. But yeah, it's a great starting point.
Yeah, and
I love the subtle brag about Herbert. Fantastic, very subtle. No one caught it. Go ahead, Mark.
No, that's good. I'm glad you pointed that out. Yeah, no, it's not an absolute, but it gives you a starting point, and that's what you should at the very least be doing. So, well, let's move on to the second trade, which is the one I call the bad trade. I'll let you guys tell me what you think, and then I'll let you know why I think it's the bad trade. But that is a trade between McJammer and Steele, where McJammer received Kareem Hunt, Denzel Mims, and Mike Davis. And Ian Steele, he received Deontay Johnson, Chase Edmonds, and pick 17 in the 2021 draft. Sean, start us out.
Well, in this trade, there was a difference of 12.3. And to give you a little reference of that, Darius Slayton was a 10.9. So make up the difference in your head. The interesting part of my trade calculator that I used, they loved Deontay Johnson. They gave him a 30 points. They gave him 30 points, which is very significant because it came out to Mick Jammer getting 28 points, and that other dude that we won't bring up his name got a 40.3. And the big difference in my calculator was that they were absolutely head over heels for Deontay Johnson. That was the big difference. Me personally, I love this trade. I think this trade helps both teams, unfortunately. But I think Kareem Hunt is definitely a 1B instead of the best handcuff in the league, blah, blah, blah. I think he is a set it and forget it flex guy, actually, depending on the matchup. And because he has shown that he can do very well, even with Chubb doing very well on his own right. So I think him alone, without even bringing in Mims, the upside of Mims that was drafted in the second round in our rookie draft, without even bringing him into the consideration, I think this trade was very, very good. What do you think there, Mike?
Yeah, I agree. I think this is actually of all the trades we're going to talk about, since the next one's, this is the most equal trade that my calculator has. I have a 5% acceptable variance on this one as well, assuming one quarterback, 0.5 PPR. This one is actually into the fair trade section of this calculator, but it's actually the same where Deontay Johnson is the most valued player in this trade, with Kareem Hunt not far behind. Like Sean said, I think they're both kind of plug and play guys. The only thing I'd be worried about is just the Carolina situation with Mike Davis. Is he staying? Is he going? That kind of whole thing. But obviously, with what happened with CMC, I think marketing someone like Mike Davis is totally justifiable. And that's sort of where I was saying earlier about, trade calculators don't take that kind of stuff into consideration. So I totally see that. The late second for Ian getting that is actually pretty big for him. Up until right before this, I don't think he had much of a draft next year. Now he.
If I could just jump in there. No, he did not have a draft. Continue.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
So that was pretty big for him. I'm sure he likes that quite a bit, being able to pick that. I think he's in the first now, unfortunately. But yeah, I like the trade from both sides as well. I think Kareem Hunt and CMC are going to be a pretty dynamic running back duo for Marco next year.
Yeah, my calculator had it pretty even as well. I guess what I'm looking at is kind of what we know now as opposed to what could happen. So yeah, I agree. Kareem was kind of the prize because I wanted to have a guy I can put in the flex, and he is kind of a set it and forget it dude there. But Deontay Johnson has led the Steelers in targets the last 2 years. So based on what we know now, I gave quite a bit away there. I got Denzel Mims kind of, in return there. So I'm just going to be like brutally honest here. So I kind of was targeting Mims a bit because he's a really good athlete. And I feel like that his situation is going to improve with the new coach and probably a new quarterback in there. And just looking at his athletic profile, I'm just kind of gambling on the fact that he's going to make a jump in the second year. I feel like Deontay Johnson could take a step back because it's a little bit more unsettled there in Pittsburgh. I think, it's he and Claypool are probably the 1 and 2 moving forward, but who's going to be throwing the ball? What's the situation going to be? So I feel like he could take a step back. Chase Edmonds is a guy I really like. I had him in every league this year that I was in. And I feel like I'm a little torn trading him away because I feel like Drake won't be there next year and he'll be the number 1 guy. So I might have just traded him a number 1 running back, even though he's kind of low right now. He may be the number 1 next year. So yeah, it's kind of mixed emotions on this one. Mike Davis really wasn't anything to move the needle for me. And I even told, Ian tried to trade him to me several times and tried to sell high on him a bunch of times. And I told him I wasn't really interested, and I didn't even think he would be the handcuff next season. He may not even be there, but I knew he wanted to dump him. So I kind of like, okay, I'll take Mike Davis off your hands to make the rest of the deal happen. So that's where that one was. So when I say it's a bad trade, I'm glad to hear you guys have a little more confidence in it. It's one that to me feels like a gamble. It could blow up in my face, or it could be a great trade. We won't really know until next season.
Well, I think in my point of view, and this is only my point of view, is that you traded a little bit of depth at wide receiver to gain a little depth at running back. You traded the upside of Deontay Johnson and then added Kareem Hunt and Mike Davis. Mike Davis,
yeah. And I knew he wasn't going to trade Kareem for nothing. So I knew I had to dangle some carrots, and I knew which carrots he was interested in. So, all right, well, let's move on to the ugly, the good, the bad, and the ugly. That's our theme tonight. So this is the ugly trade. So Dylan, our boy Dylan, he received Damian Harris, N'Keal Harry, James White, and James Washington. He gave up pick number 4. These are all 2021, all 2021 draft. Pick number 4, pick number 11, pick number 14, and pick 34 originally, although that one went back to him. We'll kind of get back to him, but in the original deal, pick 34 was part of it. Sean, I kind of know your thoughts, but go ahead and verbalize it.
You go first.
Oh, we're going to change the rotation. Okay, Mike, tell us what you think about this trade. Tell us what you really think.
All right. Go
I
ahead.
jumped in a little bit in the chat after this one. So some of my early thoughts are unfortunately in internet history. But I don't like it. I don't really like it from the get-go. I don't, not to be mean, I just don't understand the thought process behind it, which might change how I look at it. But I mean, the pick side has a value on my calculator of 15,620, which is by far the most that we've talked about.
What is that player-wise?
Well, then 15,000 is, you're looking at a combined Patrick Mahomes and Derrick Henry on this.
Oh, okay. Just those two guys? Okay, go ahead.
And then the player side, so the James White and N'Keal Harry, that is a value of about 7,000. So the difference on my calculator is roughly Patrick Mahomes, a difference of Derrick Henry. I mean, you're looking at, some real dynasty assets that, if you're going to send all that, you could have gotten something incredible with it. And I feel like you got a lot of New England Patriots and then James Washington. I don't think that the one first round pick, I don't think that is the value that I would have sent to get all four of them. You probably have to convince me even for the 2 seconds that that's okay. But I guess without trying to be mean about it, I'd love to understand the thought process behind it. From, was it a depth move? I'm trying to get some of that. I guess I don't understand that part of it, which might change it. But I guess, now Ian's loaded in this draft, so maybe he busts on all of them. Who knows?
Well, first of all, I want to go on the record and say I am all for overpaying for a guy that you think is an automatic install and will sure up a spot in your lineup. I've done it twice. I did 2 first-round picks for CEH, and I did 2 first-round picks for Joe Mixon. With that said, none of these guys, to me, not knowing the mindset of Dylan, even come close to 2 seconds, let alone a first, 2 seconds, and a fourth. With that being said, personally, I would never give the champion, and it hurts me to say this, the champion of the league with only 3 picks, I'm going to go ahead and give him a first-round pick, which he wasn't in, another second-round pick. Oh, wait, if that wasn't enough, I'm going to give him a third second-round pick and another fourth. And now he's got 9 picks in this league, in this draft. 9. I digress. That was the nicest way of me saying that.
Well, you want me to jump in here, Sean? You
go ahead, Marky Mark. Finish this.
All right. I want to let you guys say what you want to say. Yeah, my calculator had a whopping difference too, and the equivalent was the equivalent in the difference in points was Mike Evans. So
same with me.
He should have walked out of this trade with a top tier receiver that he could plug in his lineup and forget about it, but he didn't. So I wanted to just point out what he got in the players that he got. So Damian Harris, he played 10 games. He was scoring 8.88 points per game. I didn't want to give where he finished because he was out to start the year. He was out to finish the year. So I looked at the 10 games he played. He averaged 8.88 points per game. I will say that's the best player that Dylan got out of this. I think that he could be a flex guy if he can stay healthy. They probably going to have some turnover at the running back position. So he is a upside guy. I will give him some credit for that one. N'Keal Henry played 14 games. He was the wide receiver 99 in 14 games.
He's an interesting one because, Cam wasn't a great passer. So I guess you could write that season off. But, N'Keal Harry also didn't do much the year before either. I think he's had 2 quarterbacks, that have not really he's not really done great with. So
Yeah, he hasn't shown a lot to have a lot of confidence in him so far. He's he was highly touted coming in. They picked him in the end of the first round, I think, when they got him. He's got that draft capital, but he hasn't lived up to it yet. So that's a big gamble in my estimation. James White, 14 games, running back 42.
He's also 28 years old.
28 years old, undrafted free agent. Will he even be with the Patriots? It's hard to say. I know he's been good for him. I'm sure they like him, but Belichick he's business first, and if he's not going to fit in this year and they want to go in a different direction, who knows where he even ends up, and if he'll have the same value for another team. I mean, he's had value because he's been in this system, I think. James Washington, he played all 16 games. Good for him. Wide receiver 77. He's liable to get cut this year. I was looking at his salary situation. They could cut him after June 1st, and it would not cost them much at all. It would be almost a prudent move on their. They would actually save a little over $1 million. I think closer to $2 million if they cut him after June 1st. No dead cap. They could use that money to get somebody else in there, and their team that needs to make some moves.
Yeah, with Juju, is he going to stay? Is he going to go? There's an easy way to give him some more money.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, I think of the 4 big receivers in Pittsburgh, he's the only one I wouldn't want. Is James Washington.
Yeah. Now, if one of the other guys was out of the way, maybe he's a little more relevant. But he's always been. He'd had to have an injury really to get in there and do much. So that's what he got. The value of the 4 guys on my calculator was 696 points. The value of the picks that Ian got was 2,073 points. And like I said, the difference was Mike Evans. On my calculator, if he had offered up that pick 11, which is valued at 628 points and a tier ahead of all the guys that he got, it would have been a fair trade, 628 points to 696. So he could have offered 1 pick to get those 4 guys. And I don't know. I don't know if Ian would have taken it, but you're looking at guys that he probably would have been cutting, maybe except for Damian Harris. He might have been cutting these guys. So yeah, that was the ugly. That was the ugly of the trades. We like to pick on Ian, but I will say that the progression of it, from what I found out, was that Ian just asked, was he willing to give up some picks, and Dylan said he was interested in those guys, and it kind of went on from there and got to be ugly. That's why we've been talking about calculators, and that I think what we like to stress here is that you should be using calculators. You got to know what you're doing. Maybe you're in love with some guys, but you got to look at the value of them, and especially using a dynasty calculator. We haven't mentioned that, but I think all of us are using dynasty calculators here.
I think that's an important point there, Marky Mark, because I mean, just to create that baseline, like we said, and just to see where you're coming out. I mean, I'm all for being high on a guy and overpaying for a guy you think is gonna boom and nobody else is seeing it. I totally get it, but with this trade, it really hurts the competitiveness of the league. I mean, if it was going to anybody else, we'd still be having the same conversation, but at a lesser value.
Yeah, I got some complaints on the trade, and nobody used the word collusion. It was all about the competitive nature and the fact that the champ, who are all chasing this year to try to unseat him, was sitting there with nothing in the draft, and now he's pretty well loaded in the draft. So we would just urge Dylan to plug these things in, man. See what you're dealing with. And imagine if he did, he'd be like, "Oh shit, man, I can't offer all this for these guys, man. That's way too much, if he was kind of dismissive about the calculators in the chat, said something about it in the chat. And if he'd have put it in there, he probably would have been like, oh man, I'm way overpaying for these guys. Let me back this down a little bit,
What do you think, Mike?
Yeah, I think, like you've been saying, that baseline is really the most important part of it. I mean, there's been some trades where, I haven't looked at calculators. There's been some trades obvious that it went through the whole thing with other guys that, calculator probably wasn't involved too much, other than to get that baseline. And really, if that's all you want to use it for is to just make sure you're in the ballpark, that's fine. But, I get not, relying on a calculator the whole thing and just getting the numbers to make sense, because there's much more to it than that. But, at least make sure you're in the ballpark, or, at least in the same, major leagues and not playing like AAA.
Yeah.
But
Great. I love the analogy. One last real quick question for the panel here, for my esteemed hosts. With all those picks, what do you think the other guy's gonna do with all of them? Should we freeze them out and make him have to draft all those guys and drop the people for him? I think we should. But that is only me. And if you want to get on that bandwagon, I have plenty of seats around. So what do you guys think? Real quick.
Yeah, it's funny to me. I've seen guys, doing Dynasty a few years now. They accumulate all these picks, and they're like, oh man, look at all these picks I got. Boy, I'm going to be able to really reload my roster. And then you realize you got to make drops. You don't always have all that room on the taxi, and then you got to put guys on your roster, and it can make your roster kind of thin. So it's you got to have a fine line between having guys that are startable and having upside rookies. And that's why we got the taxi squad. You're supposed to be able to stash them there. And if you don't have a lot of room there, then yeah, you got to make cuts, and you may want to be trading those things away. And I was in that position before too, where I'm like, damn, I can't make all these cuts. So I'm like making 3-for-1 deals just to make my cuts, So he's definitely going to have to do some shuffling there. What do you think about it, Mike?
Yeah, I'm going to assume here, and Ian, I know you're going to watch this soon, but I'm going to assume that you know what you're doing a little bit with some of these picks. But if I'm Ian and I have that many picks, you have a good roster still. I would be trying to kick them to 2022. I think I'd be trying to, get some of the value. You can't draft all 8. I think that'd be kind of ridiculous, even though I'd love to see that happen. But I'd be trying to, just kick them to next year. Wait till the draft. When guys are looking at a guy that they want on the board and, want to move up and, move to next year. And then in 2022, you have too many, move to 2023. Make the trade last a while, because you have a lot of picks and an okay team. But, otherwise, I think you should pick all 8 of them and drop some dudes. I think that'd be fun.
I think that's a fantastic advice. So that other guy probably shouldn't take that advice. I think it's going to be interesting once we get closer to the draft, and this other guy that I keep alluding to is looking at all these picks, and he's like, oh no, I gotta be dropping these guys to make room. I think some of those picks are gonna go at a premium. Not premium, but like maybe a little slight than a premium before draft day, if you get what I mean. So that is our show. Dylan, do better. You are better than this. That is the nicest way for me to say that. I know you are better than that trade. I have said my piece. I will not bring it up like that crappy, horrible Aaron Rodgers trade that we keep. So, just in case you all forget, Ian, you suck.